Some people are born evil. Others are carefully crafted into monsters by the world around them. Dr. Scarlett Sinn believed she understood the difference until the day she discovered her own capacity for darkness. The morning started like any other in her pristine psychology practice on Manhattan's Upper East Side. Scarlett adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses and reviewed the file of her next patient, Marcus Webb, a wealthy businessman accused of embezzling millions from charity organizations. The irony wasn't lost on her. She specialized in treating white-collar criminals, believing everyone deserved redemption. What she didn't know was that Marcus would become the catalyst for her own moral destruction. "Dr. Sinn, your 9 o'clock is here," her receptionist announced through the intercom. Scarlett smoothed her navy blazer and opened the door to find a man who looked nothing like the monster described in his police reports. Marcus Webb was handsome in an understated way, with kind eyes that seemed to hold genuine remorse. As he settled into the leather chair across from her, something shifted in Scarlett's chest, a flutter of attraction she hadn't felt in years. "I know what you're thinking," Marcus said, his voice soft and melodic. "How could someone like me steal from sick children?" "The truth is, Dr. Sinn, I've been asking myself that same question every night for 6 months." His vulnerability felt authentic, and Scarlett found herself leaning forward, drawn into his narrative like a moth to flame. Over the following weeks, their sessions became the highlight of Scarlett's days. Marcus spoke eloquently about his troubled childhood, his desperate need for his father's approval, and the crushing pressure that led to his first fraudulent transaction. Scarlett documented everything professionally, but privately she was falling for him. She began staying late at the office, crafting treatment plans that would extend their time together. She told herself it was dedication to his rehabilitation, but deep down she knew better. The transformation happened so gradually that Scarlett didn't notice when her ethical boundaries began to blur. She started small, adjusting her notes to present Marcus in a more favorable light for his upcoming trial. Then she began sharing details about other patients, carefully omitting names but providing enough information for Marcus to piece together who they were. He listened with such genuine interest, such compassion for these troubled souls, that Scarlett convinced herself she was helping him understand human nature better. The first major boundary violation came during their 7th session. Marcus was describing a particularly painful memory when he began to cry. Without thinking, Scarlett moved from behind her desk and sat beside him on the couch. She took his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers, and something fundamental shifted inside her. The professional distance she'd maintained with hundreds of patients evaporated in that moment. "You understand me in a way no one else ever has," Marcus whispered, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I feel like I can tell you anything, Scarlett." The use of her first name sent shivers down her spine, and she didn't correct him. Instead, she squeezed his hand tighter, crossing another line she'd sworn never to cross. That evening, Scarlett sat in her empty apartment, staring at Marcus's files spread across her coffee table. She'd made copies, a clear violation of patient confidentiality, but she couldn't stop herself from studying every detail of his life. His childhood photos, his psychological evaluations, his financial records. She was obsessed, and for the first time in her career, she didn't care about the consequences. Marcus Webb was rewiring her brain, teaching her that some rules were worth breaking for love. As she fell asleep that night, Scarlett didn't realize she was taking her first steps down a path that would transform her from healer to accomplice, from respected psychologist to willing participant in a scheme far darker than anything she'd ever encountered in her practice. 3 months into treating Marcus Webb, Scarlett Sinn had crossed more professional boundaries than she'd ever imagined possible. But the morning she discovered the truth about her star patient, she realized her descent into darkness had only just begun. Scarlett arrived at her office to find Marcus waiting in the hallway, his usual composed demeanor replaced by barely contained excitement. "I have something incredible to show you," he said, pulling out his phone before they'd even entered her office. On the screen was a news article about the Children's Hope Foundation, one of the charities he'd allegedly defrauded. The headline made Scarlett's stomach drop. "Foundation director arrested for massive fraud scheme." "They arrested the wrong person," Marcus explained as they settled into their usual spots on the couch. The real thief was Thomas Caldwell, the foundation director. He'd been skimming money for years and needed a scapegoat when the FBI started investigating. Scarlett felt a mixture of relief and confusion wash over her. If Marcus was innocent, why hadn't he simply presented this evidence from the beginning? Marcus leaned closer, his eyes sparkling with an intensity she'd never seen before. "Here's the beautiful part, Scarlett. I knew about Thomas's theft months before anyone else. I could have reported him, but instead I gathered evidence. Detailed records, financial transactions, communications. Everything needed to destroy him completely." The pride in his voice sent a chill down Scarlett's spine, but she found herself leaning in, captivated by his revelation. "I planted just enough breadcrumbs to make myself look guilty," Marcus continued, his hand finding hers. "I needed someone brilliant and compassionate to help me navigate the psychological aftermath of being falsely accused. I needed you, Scarlett. I researched dozens of therapists before choosing you. You were perfect, ethical enough to believe in redemption, but lonely enough to be vulnerable to genuine connection." The words hit Scarlett like physical blows. Everything about their relationship had been calculated, manipulated, designed to make her fall for him. She should have been horrified, should have ended their sessions immediately. Instead, she felt a dark thrill coursing through her veins. Marcus hadn't just chosen her randomly. He'd studied her, pursued her, orchestrated their entire relationship because he recognized something special in her. "You're not disgusted?" Marcus asked, studying her reaction carefully. Most people would be running for the door right now. Scarlett looked into his eyes and saw herself reflected there, not the ethical psychologist she'd always been, but someone capable of moral flexibility, someone who could appreciate the artistry of a perfectly executed deception. "Show me the evidence," she heard herself saying. "Show me everything." Marcus smiled, and Scarlett realized she'd just passed some kind of test. Over the next hour, He laid out the entire scheme with the precision of a master chess player, explaining his winning strategy. He'd spent 2 years gathering intelligence on Thomas Caldwell, learning his weaknesses, documenting his crimes. Then he'd carefully positioned himself to appear guilty while ensuring the real criminal would eventually be exposed. But why go through all this trouble? Scarlett asked, though part of her already understood. You could have simply reported Thomas from the beginning. Marcus's smile turned predatory, and for the first time, Scarlett glimpsed the calculating mind behind his gentle facade. Because reporting him would have been justice, Marcus replied. What I did was art. I didn't just expose a criminal, I destroyed him completely. His reputation, his family, his future. He'll spend the next decade in prison while I emerge as the victim who overcame false accusations. The psychological damage I inflicted will last far longer than any prison sentence. Scarlett should have been appalled by his casual cruelty, but instead, she felt a surge of admiration. Marcus had weaponized the justice system itself, turning it into an instrument of perfectly calibrated revenge. It was brilliant, terrifying, and utterly immoral. As she looked at him with new eyes, Scarlett realized she was no longer just treating a patient. She was learning from a master manipulator who saw people as chess pieces and society as his personal game board. I want to learn from you, she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Marcus squeezed her hand, and Scarlett knew there was no going back. She'd chosen her path, and it led away from everything she'd once believed about right and wrong, straight into the intoxicating darkness of absolute moral freedom. 6 months after discovering Marcus's true nature, Dr. Scarlett Sinn had become someone she no longer recognized. But it wasn't until she orchestrated her first, calculated act of psychological warfare that she understood the intoxicating power of controlled destruction. The opportunity presented itself in the form of Dr. Patricia Hoffman, Scarlett's former mentor and the woman who'd given her the recommendation that launched her career. Patricia had recently been appointed to the State Psychology Licensing Board, a position Scarlett had desperately wanted. Worse yet, Patricia had begun asking uncomfortable questions about Scarlett's relationship with Marcus Webb, whose case had become high profile after Thomas Caldwell's conviction. She's becoming a problem, Scarlett confided to Marcus during one of their evening meetings, which had long since moved beyond the confines of her office. They were sitting in Marcus's penthouse apartment, surrounded by the evidence of his wealth he'd accumulated through a dozen schemes similar to the Caldwell operation. Marcus studied Scarlett with the focused attention of a scientist examining a fascinating specimen. Tell me about her vulnerabilities, he said, settling back into his leather chair. Everyone has pressure points, Scarlett. The art is in finding them and applying just the right amount of force. Scarlett found herself analyzing her former mentor with clinical detachment. Patricia was divorced, struggling with her teenage daughter's addiction issues, and desperately trying to maintain her professional reputation while her personal life crumbled. She was also proud, ethical to a fault, and completely devoted to protecting the integrity of the psychology profession. Her daughter, Emma, Scarlett said slowly, the plan forming as she spoke, She's been in and out of rehab 3 times. Patricia would do anything to protect her, including compromising her professional standards. Marcus smiled approvingly, and Scarlett felt a rush of pride at earning his validation. Over the following weeks, Scarlett meticulously researched Emma Hoffman's addiction history, her social circles, her patterns of behavior. She discovered that Emma had been selling her prescription medications to other addicts, a federal crime that could result in serious prison time. More importantly, she learned that Patricia had been covering for her daughter, using her professional connections to keep Emma out of legal trouble. The plan Scarlett developed was elegantly simple. She would anonymously tip off the DEA about Emma's drug dealing, then position herself as Patricia's ally when the investigation inevitably expanded to examine Patricia's role in covering up her daughter's crimes. Patricia would be grateful for Scarlett's support, never suspecting that her former protege had orchestrated her downfall. Scarlett made the anonymous call on a Tuesday morning using a burner phone Marcus had provided. She reported Emma Hoffman's location, the names of her known associates, and specific details about her operation that only someone with inside knowledge could possess. Within hours, Emma was arrested, and the investigation that would destroy Patricia's career was set in motion. Watching the news coverage that evening, Scarlett felt a strange mixture of guilt and exhilaration. She'd just destroyed 2 lives with a single phone call, but the precision and effectiveness of her attack filled her with an almost sexual satisfaction. Marcus noticed her reaction and moved closer on the couch, his hand tracing patterns on her thigh. "How does it feel?" he whispered in her ear. The power to reshape someone's entire existence with just a few carefully chosen actions. Scarlett closed her eyes and leaned into his touch, allowing herself to fully embrace the dark pleasure coursing through her system. She'd crossed the final line, transforming from passive observer to active participant in the systematic destruction of human lives. 2 days later, Patricia called Scarlett in tears. "I don't know what to do," she sobbed over the phone. "Emma's been arrested, and now they're investigating me. They think I've been helping her cover up federal crimes. My career is over, Scarlett. Everything I've worked for my entire life is gone." Scarlett made appropriate sympathetic noises while taking notes on Patricia's emotional state. She was already planning her next move, positioning herself to swoop in and offer support while secretly documenting Patricia's vulnerability for future exploitation. The woman who had once been her beloved mentor was now just another chess piece in the elaborate game. She and Marcus were playing with the world around them. As she hung up the phone, Scarlett caught her reflection in her office window. The woman staring back at her had the same face, the same wire-rimmed glasses, but her eyes held a predatory gleam that would have terrified the idealistic young psychologist she'd once been. She'd become exactly what she'd once studied and tried to heal, a calculating predator who viewed other people's suffering as entertainment and their destruction as art. 1 year after her first taste of calculated cruelty, Dr. Scarlett Sinn had built an empire of psychological manipulation that stretched far beyond anything she'd ever imagined. But on the night everything came crashing down, She discovered that even the most careful predators eventually become prey themselves. Scarlett stood in her office, surrounded by files on dozens of patients she'd systematically exploited over the past 12 months. Each folder represented a life she'd helped destroy, business executives she'd driven to suicide through carefully crafted psychological pressure, politicians she'd blackmailed using secrets revealed in therapy sessions, and wealthy families she'd torn apart by exploiting their deepest insecurities. She'd become the puppet master of human misery, and the power was intoxicating. Marcus entered without knocking, a habit that had once charmed her but now felt intrusive. Their relationship had evolved beyond romance into something darker, a partnership built on mutual corruption and shared guilt. "We have a problem," he said, his usually calm demeanor cracked with genuine worry. "Patricia Hoffman didn't just disappear quietly like we planned." Scarlett felt ice forming in her stomach. Patricia had been found dead in her apartment 3 weeks ago, an apparent suicide brought on by the disgrace of her daughter's arrest and her own professional downfall. The investigation had been brief and perfunctory, just another casualty of the opioid crisis that had claimed her daughter's life and destroyed her career. Scarlett had felt a moment of genuine remorse at the funeral, but it had quickly been overwhelmed by satisfaction at the completion of her plan. "She left recordings," Marcus continued, pulling out a small digital device. "Hours of audio files detailing her suspicions about you, about us, about the systematic way her life was destroyed. She was smarter than we gave her credit for." The device seemed to pulse with malevolent energy in his palm, and Scarlett realized that their carefully constructed world was about to implode. As Marcus played the recordings, Scarlett heard her former mentor's voice describing their relationship with devastating accuracy. Patricia had noticed the pattern of Scarlett's patients experiencing unusually severe psychological breakdowns. She documented the suspicious timing of various personal tragedies that had befallen people in Scarlett's orbit. Most damning of all, she'd recorded her final phone conversation with Scarlett, capturing the subtle tone of satisfaction beneath her expressions of sympathy. She sent copies to the FBI, the state psychology board, and 3 different journalists, Marcus said, his voice flat with defeat. "We have maybe 24 hours before this goes public." Scarlett sank into her chair, feeling the weight of her choices crushing down on her like a physical force. She'd spent a year learning to destroy other people's lives, but she'd never prepared for her own destruction. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd become everything she'd once studied and tried to heal. The same psychological patterns she'd identified in her criminal patients were now governing her own behavior. The need for control, the addiction to power over others, the gradual erosion of empathy until other people became nothing more than objects to be manipulated for her own satisfaction. Marcus was already planning their escape, talking about false identities and offshore accounts, but Scarlett found herself strangely calm. She looked around her office one final time, seeing it through the eyes of the idealistic young woman who'd once believed in redemption and healing. That woman was gone, replaced by a monster who'd learned to feed on human suffering with the same casual efficiency Marcus had taught her to admire. As sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer with each passing moment. Scarlett realized that evil wasn't something people were born with. It was something they chose, decision by small decision, boundary by broken boundary. She'd made those choices willingly, seduced by the intoxicating power of absolute moral freedom. Now she would pay the price, not as a victim of circumstance, but as someone who'd consciously chosen to become the architect of other people's nightmares. The door burst open as federal agents flooded into her office, weapons drawn and voices shouting commands. As they forced her to the ground, Scarlett caught one final glimpse of her reflection in the broken glass of her psychology degree, shattered on the floor beside her. The woman staring back was everything she'd once sworn to fight against. Predator who'd learned that the most dangerous evil isn't the kind that announces itself with violence, but the kind that wears a compassionate face while slowly poisoning everything it touches. If you found yourself captivated by Scarlett's psychological transformation and want to explore more stories about the dark psychology behind human evil, make sure to subscribe for more chilling tales of moral corruption. Share this story with someone who enjoys psychological thrillers and let us know in the comments, at what point did you realize Scarlett had crossed the line from victim to villain? Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the human psyche's darkest corners.